was holding back a little bit on this because I thought maybe that it was just too nerdy. J.R.R. Tolkien was a linguist by trade before he sold 150 million copies of a book. He was a linguist, and he developed 4 complete languages, at least, for The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings books. Supplementally to that, he also wrote the Nicene Creed and the Lord's Prayer in Elvish. So our prayer time this morning will be an attempt to include the Lord's Prayer written in the language of the elves that J.R.R. Tolkien created for the Lord of the Rings. I invite you into a spirit and attitude of prayer and openness in this space to the Spirit of God. And we think of everything that we've been through recently and the challenges and the struggles, but also the wins and the successes and the joys. We come into God's Spirit with the things that we know are coming up, and our hopes and our dreams and our fears and doubts for the future, and also all of those unknown things that we know are going to happen, because we know there will be unknown things. We bring all of that into the presence of God, into the Spirit. Atarama in ea, han ea. Naere celia. Arenalia na tolova. Nakare indomelia. Kemende tamba erumande. Amen anta sira ilaurea masama. Our amen apsin uncaramar siv ime apicent tin en uncare imen. Alametulia usa tiena malame eteletha olkulu. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Naese. Amen.
Our scripture reading this morning is from the book of Luke, chapter 14, verses 1 and then 7 through 14. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. Then the humility and hospitality. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, "Give this person your place," and then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers and sisters or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. May God bless the reading and hearing of the word.
Thank you, Wanda. I don't know if I have successfully expressed just how much The Lord of the Rings hit me and other nerds my age. I mean, I'm obviously a fan, but I don't think you all really understand. So I want us to go back. The Lord of the Rings, the movies came out in 2001. So in September of 2001, I was 19 years old when we all watched 9/11 happen on the TV on a Tuesday morning. So I'm a 19-year-old college student at Central Methodist College, now university. The lobby is packed but silent. I'm actually on my way to chapel on a Tuesday morning to practice with the praise band. And we're watching 9/11 happen. And 9/11 was to us at 19, was to everybody, but us at 19 and 20 and 21, this was our Challenger explosion, this was our Vietnam, this was our summer of love, this was our world is never going to be the same after this. And especially it was the 90s are over. And the 90s were fairly, relatively comfortable and calm, but that time was over for us. So that is September 11th, 2001, and on November 16th of 2001, we're introduced to the boy who lived for the first time, and Harry Potter taught us a lesson. Nothing like Harry Potter will ever happen again. 8 movies over 10 years with the same cast, the same crew, the same storytellers, the same director, the same look. Nothing like that will ever happen again. And that was November 16th of 2001. And then at Christmas time, Peter Jackson brought us into this world of The Lord of the Rings. The Fellowship of the Ring comes out in theaters, and 3 months after 9/11. And because actually of Harry Potter, they invent a showtime for Lord of the Rings, 11 p.m. the day before it's supposed to come out. So as early as they could possibly show the movie, because of the lines from Harry Potter in November, they started showing the movie, and I was there. I was there at 12:01 a.m. on November 19th at the Forum 8 Theater. And the next 3 Christmases were defined by the Lord of the Rings movies, and we're brought into this world, and all of the first 2 kind of end on openly. It's not really a cliffhanger, but they end openly, and we had to wait a year. We couldn't binge this. And the movies were made together. They were made at the same time. The cast and crew took no breaks. They were all filmed so that they could be released in sequential years. So 9/11 comes. Our Berlin Wall happens, or whatever your generational thing is. We are all in shock, and in that state of mind, we're brought into these 2 worlds. In one of those worlds, the villain's main motivation is xenophobic hatred against people who don't have magical abilities. In the other world, our villain's main motivation is just power and control. And we got into these stories and needed to know, even though we were young and even though we were small and even though we didn't really know what to do or what to expect next, that good people rallying together to stand against darkness and evil and violence win every time. Some people leaned more towards Harry Potter than they did Lord of the Rings, but I've never met anyone who liked one and hated the other one. It's just sort of this generational thing. Oh, and in between here, by the way, starting in 1999, we're getting new Star Wars at the same time. This was, to be a nerd under the age of 30 in the year 2000 was just an incredible time to be alive. So 3 years, 2001 and 2 and 3, were defined by Christmas in the theater watching Lord of the Rings. We take these 3-hour journeys, and close to 13 now, because the extended editions are the only ones we have. And yes, I have done it all in one day. So we are very much informed by 9/11 and the start of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We are very much informed by DVDs and special bonus features in their absolute peak of existence. And we would watch the Fellowship of the Ring for 3 hours, and then we would immediately watch the Fellowship of the Ring with the commentary on for 3 more hours. And then in 2003, it's just over. The story is told. The ring is destroyed, and Strider, the wilderness ranger Aragorn, accepts who he is and reveals himself as the king of Gondor. And then, so after all of that, with all of that baggage underneath it and that whole experience for these 3 years, we get this scene from Aragorn's coronation ceremony.
My friends, you bow to no one.
When I tell you that biker gangs wept openly in the theaters when this happened, Aaron's crying right now. that Navy SEALs that choked up when this moment happened. The hobbits just starting to bow like everybody else. And I love how Merry looks at the other ones because he doesn't know what to do at the beginning. And the heir of Isildur that Middle Earth has been waiting for 2,500 years is back as the king of the primary kingdom of the human race in Middle Earth, and therefore the high king of the human race in all of Middle Earth. His coronation ceremony, and his elvish bride has just revealed that she has given up her elvish immortality so that they might be married and have a life together. And they start to bow in front of this king, and he says, no. You bow to no one. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. It's better to be asked to move up to the seat of honor than to be asked to make room for someone else. So a lot of characters in The Lord of the Rings that exalt themselves above their station. We'll start with Grima Wormtongue, and with a name like Grima Wormtongue, you had to be a bad guy. You had no choice about it. Grima, son of Galmod, the counselor and the king of the human kingdom of Rohan, the ranchers, the horse lords of the Middle-earth. Along the way, as Sauron, our big bad, grows in power, Grima betrays his king and aligns himself with the dark wizard Sauron, because Sauron promises that after this war takes place, that Grima will become king of Rohan, and he'll be the lord of Rohan, and he'll get to marry Éowyn, the niece of the current king. She doesn't get a say in it, obviously. And Sauron the wizard possesses King Theoden from afar, makes him look like that. But then Gandalf shows up, and Grima has no chance against Gandalf. Gandalf says, "The wise speak only of what they know, Grima, son of Galmud. A witless worm you have become. Therefore be silent and keep your forked tongue behind your teeth." But the real story of hubris in The Lord of the Rings is the tragedy of Denethor. In the first war against Sauron, 2,500 years ago, right? Then the loss of King Isildur, the disappearance of his lineage and his heirs, Gondor had been ruled by stewards of the throne, not kings, not royal, but noble families, just brilliantly portrayed by John Noble, who made eating tomatoes look like madness somehow. So a couple thousand years after that, you've been steward for so long, and the stewardship has passed from father to son to son to son to son. You start to kind of feel like the throne is yours, right? I mean, you are the king. Denethor sees himself as the king of Gondor. He plans to pass on the throne to his eldest son, Boromir. He's not at all pleased with the rumors that Isildur's heir has been revealed and that Aragorn is back. So I want you to listen to this next part real closely. So a deeply prideful and arrogant and narcissistic man gets manipulated by power and the promise of more power through the obsessive consumption of false information from a single media source that in this case happens to be a crystal ball, and is completely broken, driven insane by his inability to cope with the potential loss of his power. It drives him mad, and then he becomes envious and jealous and cruel. In the books, Denethor has this crystal ball called Palantir. It's in the extended editions. It's not in the theatrical release. And this crystal ball helps him to see the past and the future and things that could be and things that not necessarily could be, but this crystal ball is controlled by our big bad Sauron. And so through it, he convinces Denethor that all hope is lost and that Frodo is already dead and the ring is gone again and the orcs are taking over. And then he gets the news that his heir is Boromir has died, protecting Frodo and the ring. So he believes that his power is at an end. That either way, the king of Gondor is back, or Sauron wins and Gondor is gone. And so he leaps from the top of the White Tower of Gondor. Hubris is not a new theme in our literature. The hubris of the fatal flaw of unearned, misplaced, excessive pride and arrogance is a theme that goes back to as long as we've been telling each other stories about ourselves. Icarus flew too close to the sun, right? We have the word narcissist because a guy named Narcissus was so enamored with his own reflection. That's the tragedy of Narcissus. It's almost like we've always been able to think too highly of ourselves. We've always been willing to do some terrible and some stupid things to prove our pride and how big we are. So in a couple places, Jesus takes us back to the last shall be first. And if any one of you want to be a master, you must become a servant, which is very Eastern too, by the way. It's very Taoist and Buddhist. But Jesus' first example at this party, he goes to the party of the Pharisees. In Luke, he goes to three or four of these parties at the Pharisees. And the first ones are just kind of, there's a new teacher on the scene, and we're interested in him. But he keeps, calling them brood of vipers, and they don't like that. People don't like to be called broods of vipers. And so this time it says they were watching him closely, right? And then he healed a guy. We skipped those verses. He healed a guy on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees got mad that Jesus healed a guy because it was the Sabbath, and that counts as work. We're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. So then, looking around, and I feel like this first example that Jesus gives is almost funny when you think about it. I imagine in my head Rowan Atkinson as Mr. Bean sits up at the seat of honor, the right hand of the host. Mr. Bean takes the seat of honor right next to the host, and then and the steward has to keep coming to him and saying, "I'm sorry, this is not your seat, that someone more important than you is coming." And he has to hop down the row until there's no more chairs, and then he just falls on the floor at the very end. Don't assume you're more important than you are. Now, you all can see the difference between self-esteem and arrogance, right? We are okay. We know that. And you also know I'm not talking about pride, right, with a capital P, but pride with a lowercase p. There's a difference. But the exaltation that Jesus means here is unearned, completely, undeserved, unhealthy. So all who exalt themselves will then be humbled. And then Jesus goes deeper than that, and he speaks to the host himself. He has a lesson for the guests who are elbowing each other out of the way to get to the seat of honor. And then he talks to the host and says, "Look, all of these people are eventually going to have a dinner party and invite you. If you're hosting the dinner, don't just invite the high-status people to surround yourself with sycophants and people who are going to turn around and invite you to their table. If you're going to set this table like this, then invite the people who need it. Invite the poor and the hungry and the people who won't pay you back." Jesus is constantly upending our assumptions of strength and power and status. And so do these stories. The Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Spider-Man, I mean, all of these stories upend the assumptions of strength and power. Our gospel and our stories tell us that the weakest, incorruptible people are inherently more powerful than the corruptible strong. The elves had the skills needed to destroy the ring, but they were too arrogant. The dwarves had the strength to destroy the ring, but they were too greedy. The humans had the courage, but they were too easily seduced by power. It had to be the hobbits. It had to be the brave, hardy, persistent, humble hobbits to carry the ring and stand against the darkness, because they wouldn't stop and they wouldn't be corrupted by the promise of power in the ring. And when things are as dark as they seem to be right now, we need to know that it is only the brave and the hardy and the persistent and the humble that can stand against it. That's the message of the Lord of the Rings. Amen. One of the ways we get to do